what I like to say is these days, this sprint is bookended by these important events. Okay, so event. Now these used to be called ceremonies. So if you're out on the web and you're doing your research and your documents, you see the word ceremony, don't get confused. It's the same thing. They just changed that recently. Okay? And the first event that we're going to discuss, and it is the topic of this module, is the sprint planning meeting. Okay? Now the sprint planning meeting, we did talk a little bit about this yesterday, but this is on the front end. This happens before we begin sprinting, and it has two parts to it. The first part is the what, the second part is the how. If you were to guess, who do you think owns the what part?
Product owner.
Product owner, yep. Product owner is all about what. They are what features should be next, what are the highest priority features, they're all about what. So the what portion is broken into, well, there are two deliverables that are expected of the what portion. And the first is to declare a sprint goal, okay? We'll talk a little bit more about sprint goals. We'll see some examples when we get into the slides. But for now, understand that that isn't a deliverable of the what portion that is led by the product owner. And we like to say that sprint goals should be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. We call them SMART. Okay? The second deliverable is to actually determine which of these features from the product backlog we are going to move into the sprint backlog and commit to as a part of this sprint. That's those are the two deliverables as part of the what meeting. Okay? So the second one, decide which of these will be included in this sprint. And what we do is we go through these one by one, and the product owner lobbies for these stories. They are the one that has the vision for the product. They are the one that's in charge of the backlog, product backlog. They are the one that understands the priority of these items. And they will say, this is my highest priority story. I would like to lobby for this one to go first. Okay, and we go through these one by one. And we check to make sure they meet the definition of ready. Okay? Definition of ready. It's okay. So definition of ready, we talked about this yesterday. We cannot move this item from the product backlog to the sprint backlog unless it meets the definition of ready. And we do this again one at a time. We review these. So if this is an example of a definition of ready, and I want to read through this because I think it's important to understand, get an idea of what this looks like. But I do want to let you know that this will vary from team to team. This example is from software development. We know that we do this in infrastructure. It'll vary. It'll be a little bit different, but I want you to get the sense of this. The first one says, is the team adequately staffed to complete the product backlog item? So when this comes through in the what meeting, product owner says, I want to do this, the team will say, okay, first thing, are we adequately staffed? Is that a yes or a no? If it's a yes, then we'll move on. Is the backlog item estimated and achievable? Okay? Estimated is pretty easy to understand. I think you guys probably already talked about story pointing and what it means to assign story points. So has it been story pointed? Did you play story point poker? And do we know how big this is? So estimated and achievable. Achievable is an interesting discussion. We've had some interesting discussions in this class when it comes to achievable. I think earlier you did the exercise. Did you do the soup thing when you did the story points? Did you do that? Okay. And so one of the times when we've done that, the person said, oh, it's chicken soup. And somebody said, well, you know, yeah, it's chicken soup, but it's a 2-week sprint and it takes 6 weeks to get a chicken. You know, I mean, it's kind of a silly example, but they were making the point. what if there's a procurement cycle here? You know, how does that affect the way we set this up? How do we handle this? And so if we have a situation like that where it's not achievable, then most likely what we'll do, and again, there's several different approaches where you can handle this, but one that we do is we create what we call a spike story. It's generally we call this a 0-point story because it doesn't deliver value to the product for the stakeholders, but is necessary in order to start on another story. Or sometimes it's a proof of concept prototype. We don't understand the technology. We got to learn before we can build.
Can you consider that a prerequisite?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you can actually physically do that in Jira where you make those dependable. Or I'm sorry, you make them dependent.
Since you mentioned Jira, was going to be my next question is, are there tools to guide this process and document the outcomes? So we're going through this, as you're saying, teams adequately staffed. It's great everybody talks about it around a table, but where's the documentation to look back at what happened last week, what needs to be done going forward, those kinds of things?
Okay, I'm not sure I completely understand your question. This definition of ready does vary from team to team. Usually some teams will actually do it manually and post it up on the wall. They'll create a Word document. This is part of what we call the team contract, where the team decides for themselves, because we do want to leave room in the tools for ownership by the team and for the team to do the best practice for them. So, but certainly there's ability to be able to review, and we do this when we have a retrospective. This is the kind of thing we talk about. Is we go back and we say, okay, this story, we didn't complete this story, what happened? And it's like, oh, there was a dependency, or there was a procurement issue sort of thing. It's like, well, why didn't we catch that back here? So we do some looking in the rearview mirror to kind of understand how do we get better going forward. Maybe we make a change to the definition of ready as a part of that process.
We have this.
Yep. And as a part of the team contract, Scrum Master owns a communication plan. Sometimes that's part of it, is communication plan and there is a lot of flexibility, variability from team to team as to how exactly that happens. So
it's build your own.
It is, yep. All right, so let's move on. Technical approach is understood. So as we go through this, the team, which as we learned yesterday if we're doing software development, it'll have analysts, and it'll have developers, it'll have testers on the team. So the developers, do they understand the technical approach? They speak up if they don't, because they're going to be on the hook to get it done if we commit to this, right? Can tasks be created? Is there any reason why we are not able to create tasks for this? Because we need to do that. And is the acceptance criteria clear and testable? Okay. You remember from yesterday what we said the acceptance criteria is all about? Acceptance criteria is, how do we know that we've completed the features? How do we know we've completed? It would have all of the features. So if we say that this is a form, acceptance criteria will probably have, this form needs to have name, first name, last name, telephone number, whatever it is. That would be on the acceptance. It documents the features that are necessary for this product owner to accept that story. That's the acceptance criteria. Okay. All right, so this is the definition of ready. I want you to get a sense that we kind of go through this checklist, every single story, and at some point here, we say that's enough. And I get a lot of questions about how do we know when enough is enough? Okay, and on my team, we do velocity planning, okay? And velocity planning is all about, we have a good sense of our history. We know that my team, over time, we've done about 70 story points. So we may continue to load this up until we get close to 70 story points. And we may say, hey, I think we're getting close here. I don't know if we can take any more. And then we'll check that by doing a capacity check, okay? Now, we also go through, as I think you just did in Jira, we create the tasks, we assign them, and we're getting a little bit ahead, this is part of the how meeting. And we assign them to people, and we ask the individual that we're assigning this to, how long will this take you to complete this task? And they say 8 hours or whatever, that becomes part of the document. That's a field where we put in the total effort in there, in Jira. And then they log their time against that as they accrue time, and it feeds the burn down chart. That's the way that we do things. But once we've determined that this meets our velocity, then we check it against capacity. We ask the question, what is our capacity this sprint? Is it any different than last sprint? Is somebody going to be on vacation? So that's kind of how we do that. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the slides. But I just want you to get that sense that we go through one by one, we keep filling this up until we hit our capacity.